Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out the Ultimates issue 5 by Dennis Camp, Juan Frigeri and Federico Blee. The Ultimate Universe continues to evolve and expand as we tick ever so close to the return of the Maker in 13 months time. This issue though, Iron Lad and Captain America are alerted to a big problem. Someone has been blowing up Roxxon oil pipelines and worker camps over the last 5 months, and that's not the half of it. They've been doing this immense damage with just a bow and arrow. Tony explains that it's not just any bow and arrow that's been doing all this damage. It's his cutting-edge, self-printing weapon systems that were meant for the man named Clint Barton, but he rejected Tony's invitation to join the Ultimates and trashed the suit and weapons, only to have them be picked up by someone else. Can be sure to hit home the fact that this isn't really a bad thing, since it shows the Ultimates' plans are beginning to work around the world and people are beginning to take up arms against the Maker's cabal and fight for their freedoms. Something Steve is quick to point out that is a very good thing, but this is where an interesting dynamic is thrown into the mix, as Tony has found the person who took the Hawkeye suit and weapons and ran them through the heroism system that he's developed to sort of pick out who would make a good hero, to send all of these tools to. And this person got ran through the system and came back as possibly maybe becoming a villain. Of course, Steve, ever the optimist, knows that the numbers aren't everything and thinks that this person has the right ideals, seeing as they're targeting Roxxon, and Roxxon is part of the Maker's whole New World Order. It is really refreshing to see in even the more harsh universes, Steve still has that optimism and hopeful nature, especially after all he's seen, and it's definitely a far cry from the original Ultimate Captain America, who had a little bit more of that, but was definitely a bit more harder edged and edgy, especially when Mark Millar was writing him. One thing that is changed though is this young Tony immediately recognizes the ramifications of his weapons and designs being out in the world and in the hands of someone who might use them for nefarious purposes, and he knows the responsibility that comes with that, and he has to find and stop this person, especially since this Hawkeye system could take down an entire army if used correctly. Making Hawkeye a much more imposing force in this universe is really cool, and he kind of was already, but I love the idea that this self-printing system that Tony has developed for his arrows and quiver has kind of removed the character's biggest weakness, being that he'd always, run out of arrows or not have the right one available to him. So whoever this new Hawkeye is, it's made them a much more credible threat. The idea of Tony believing this person is a villain is real neat too, says Hawkeye, and maybe a lot of people don't realize this or maybe even forgot it since it happened so long ago, is that Hawkeye actually started out as a villain. So it's cool we actually see that translated here into this new universe where, is this new Hawkeye a villain? Is this a hero? What's going on? We've got to find out about this new character who's just appeared. And I like that they've managed to combine elements from, old school Marvel origins of these characters into this new universe and change them ever so slightly, but still keep that root in the character and in who that character is. Steve eventually agrees to go and deal with this Hawkeye character himself, since the rest of the team are all busy with other threats and are stretched a little too thin. Cap ventures out into Missouri and confronts the Hawkeye, who has been dealing a lot of damage to a local Roxxon refinery. We learn this Hawkeye's name is Charlie Ramsey, and they view Cap and the Ultimates as terrorists, just like what the media have been portraying them as. Charlie doesn't leave much to talking, and they attack Cap with their special self-printing arrows, all of which are used to target Cap's weaknesses and throw him off balance, quite literally sometimes. So the whole cowboy-Indian dynamic isn't lost on me at all here, and Charlie even makes reference to it, calling Cap a cowboy and themselves an Indian, and that is because Charlie is Indian. They are part of the Oglala band of the Lakota Nation, which is a really awesome direction to take a character like Hawkeye. And I love the dynamic that Dennis Camp builds between Charlie and Steve here. It's built on the history these two peoples have with one another and the threat they pose to one another, or supposed threat that each pose to one another. It eventually comes to a head when Charlie questions why people like Tony Stark, a rich kid, and people like Steve Rogers get to be heroes, but people like them don't, all because some math said they don't get to be a hero. And it's funny how the math never seems to add up for people like them, First Nation, Native American people. And what's great is that both sides of this argument are heard. It's not really an actual argument, as Steve does understand where Charlie is coming from and agrees a lot of the time about what is happening, but he still has to defend himself against this person who is firing deadly arrows at him. As the two keep fighting, we learn from Charlie that they believe they had a vision and the HAWKEYE was meant for them, since their spirit name is actually Charlie Hawk's-Eyes. Although I like that it's kind of left ambiguous whether that's actually real or whether that's Charlie just fucking with Steve, because as the issue ends with her, coyly saying that, the white man will just believe anything they say as long as it, appears mystical. So that might be their spirit name, it might not be. If it is, it's a pretty damn cool spirit name. I think it definitely fits why they would want to be the HAWKEYE. Steve does try and apply logic to all of this as well, knowing that the vision that they saw was just Tony's message that he sent out to all of the heroes in the hero packages. We saw Spider-Man get one, Shocker got one as well, and I like that Charlie understands that it's not a vision per se, like this isn't something Charlie saw from ancestors or something. He knows it was just like Tony Stark in a hologram and stuff, but fully in belief that this vision was for them, this whole package was for them eventually, and it wasn't meant to go to Clint in this universe. Despite Charlie's flurry of arrows, Cap is able to knock Charlie down, and just in time too, as Roxxon's private military have arrived at the destroyed refinery they have been fighting through, outnumbering Steve and Charlie by the thousands. Cap and HAWKEYE put their differences aside to battle the common enemy, taking down an entire private military of Roxxon. Now I know we got quite a bit of action throughout this entire issue with Steve and Charlie fighting one another, but I do kind of wish we got to see a little bit of this fight. It's just like a one-page thing, and then we kind of skip right to the end after they have both been fighting for hours and they've managed to take down this entire army, which is damn cool. I really like this idea that this universe's HAWKEYE, as I said before, is a little bit more OP than they usually are, and it shows here, teaming with Captain America and able to stay in step with Captain America, a super soldier. That's really damn cool. After the battle, Steve reveals the true reason he came to see Charlie, as he had no intention of getting Tony's weapons back. He just wanted to be sure that Charlie was the right person for the job, and they absolutely are. The book rounds out with a page I think was a little overdue, and that is a brief look at the Maker's little cabal and how Emmanuel da Costa, the owner of Roxxon and things of that nature, is getting upset since the Ultimates are beginning to actually have an effect, but not an effect on like freeing the people or anything. He doesn't care about any of that. They're actually affecting his profit margins, and he does not like that at all. He's being made, millions of dollars poorer because of it. And I absolutely love how just in this one page it perfectly encapsulates that whole cabal that Hickman set up in his Ultimate Invasion book, where they're all just like stiff upper lip, New World Order rich elites who just care about money and power, don't care about all the people or anything. They just want that money and power, and once something starts affecting that, that's when they start to take notice. And that's what the Ultimates have been doing, which has been really refreshing. They're not just fighting bad guys in, costumes, they're not fighting, the Serpent Society or anything like that. They're actually just fighting things at the root problem. Luckily, Banner is on hand to deal with the problem, and he plans on killing all of the heroes at once. Getting more of the villains is great since we don't actually get enough of them in this book, and it feels weird. I know the book is obviously called The Ultimates, so it's going to focus on them, but we haven't really had much in the way of the villains since like the first issue, and this is, while a great page that finally brings the villains back to it, it's weird because it just kind of reiterates what we saw in issue 3, where Hulk was planning on killing the Avengers, and we just see that again here. Still, I can't wait for the Ultimates to battle the Hulk and his family, since it's been a long time coming, and I just want to learn more about the Hulk. Is the Hulk Bruce Banner? Is it David Banner? Who is this new Hulk? We don't really know a lot about him. but hopefully Dennis Camp will show us a little bit more in the coming issues. Ultimates issue 5 skillfully introduced us to the world's Hawkeye, reinventing the character in every way to make them both a more interesting person and even a pretty big heavy hitter on a team filled with already some pretty big heavy hitters. I loved the idea of tying it back to the character's roots of being a villain turned hero. I thought that was really cool. I do wish they played with that a little bit more here, though I do like the dynamic that Dennis has written for Charlie and Steve. They bat off each other very well. They have good banter and a good foil for one another. So I hope we get to see a little bit more of that in the coming issues, and I also hope we get to see a bit more of the villains, since the little bit we got in this issue was great, and it feels like that's the one thing this book has really been lacking, just like diving into villains' motivations, specifically the Hulk's motivations, and seeing a little bit more about him, since he seems to be like the big villain they're going to be fighting as like the first big trial of the Ultimates in the coming issues, and hopefully we get to see a bit more of that soon. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10.